Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever everybody is out there in the greater wide world. Hello, Thomas. How's everything over there? I know you're still in England. Is that right?
Hi, Timothy. Hi, Jason. I'm currently in Preston, Lancashire, in the north of England. I was speaking at the Mysterious Air conference this weekend. It was a fantastic thing organized by Neil MacDonald of Megalithic Tours, and it was just met some wonderful people, and we spent the day megalithic hunting around Yorkshire, and the weather's been great, and I can't complain. That's pretty good. A bit tired, but it was a great thing to get out of Ireland and come to a place where I could stand in front of a stage, in front of a sea of fat, maskless faces all smiling at me.
Fantastic. That's amazing. When is that going to be ready for viewing?
I think Neil probably starts right away. So next couple of weeks, I guess. He recorded everybody at the conference, so it'll be on his channel.
Awesome. And what's his channel's name again?
I got loads of footage for future projects for us. And so, it was very powerful to be doing all this on Samhain. It has a beautiful timing to it. And today actually is Azaro, which is the Basque Sabbath of the Witches, November 1st. And it's also they venerated the god Pan as the god of everything. So, yo Pan, I'm a man. Do what thou wilt, says the great god Pan. So he's watching over us tonight.
And in this part of the world, today is Dia de los Muertos. It's the festival of the dead and honoring of the ancestors in Mexico. So spooky season's not over quite yet.
So best wishes to everybody of Mexican and Latino descent.
Yes, best wishes. All right. Well, I'm still recovering a little bit. I was really sick before. So sorry if my voice sounds a little bit scratchy, but we're going to make it on here today. And Jason's here as always. we're going to give you guys another banger. So here we go. In keeping with spooky season still going on for one more day. So sheriff investigates reported ghost-like sightings in California mountain range. This is in Coarse Gold, California. A family in California says they experienced a strange ghost-like sighting in the Madera County mountains last week, prompting police to investigate further. Jake Gorba, his wife Victoria, and their 3 kids decided to take their 4-wheeler up to the Cheyenne Peak on Wednesday. The family stopped to eat lunch, and that's when the couple's 3-year-old son, Caden, began talking to someone. He was just in our car, and he was pointing out to a certain spot in the meadow, says Victoria. Caden told his parents there was a woman lying face down with her legs straight up in the air in a nearby meadow. According to Caden, the woman wasn't able to speak or move and needed help. He goes, "Yeah, there's a lady over in the meadow in a black shirt, and I got goosebumps," says Victoria. He says, "She needs our help, but she's dead, and she's lying face down with her legs up, and she can't talk to me, but she's over there. We have to go and help her." Jake and Victoria checked out the meadow, but saw nothing. He kept saying, trust me, Mom. And I was like, I trust you, but I believe you. I trust you, and I believe you 100%. The family was so spooked by what the 3-year-old had so adamantly shared that they decided to end their day early and head home. Then they posted about the strange occurrence on Facebook. We put it on Facebook to see if anybody knew anything about the area, and come to find out that there was a lady matching with the description that he described to us within a 5-mile radius of where we were. Sandra Hughes had gone missing in that area in June of 2020. According to Victoria, her 3-year-old's detailed description of the woman's hair and clothing was identical to the description of Hughes. He was very adamant that we needed to help her, and he described her down to the blue hair. He said, "She has a black shirt, blue jeans, and blue hair, Mom, and that's the exact description of her when she went missing." Victoria says Caden was able to identify the woman he'd seen in 3 out of 4 photos of Hughes. Madera County Sheriff Corporal Chris Williams saw the Facebook post and contacted the family to further investigate. The corporal in charge of her case actually reached out to us on Facebook and was like, "Hey, we want more information, and we want to bring you guys up there and see if you could point us in the direction." Williams has been looking into Hughes's disappearance since the beginning of the investigation. On Thursday, 2 Madera County Sheriff's deputies traveled back up to the meadow with Jake and his son to investigate. The deputies found no new evidence and the case remains open. If she was possibly a ghost looking for some help, I hope that he could have at least helped and maybe help the family find her, because it's been a long time apparently since she's been gone. The four-wheeler that the family was traveling in when this whole spooky experience took place is now referred to as the Ghost Runner and is for sale. The family says they will continue visiting different trails up the mountains, but there are definitely some spots that they won't stop at anymore. So listen to your kids when they tell you someone's dead and they need help.
Well, that's as spooky as it gets.
Yeah. Yeah, that one I'm not sure how to take on that, but it's kind of like if that's where she disappeared, whether that's actually her making an appearance again, or if it's somehow like a projection of the incident that occurred in that area. Because I know sometimes after like in an area where there's a car accident or like where there's been a battle, there's still that lingering impression of the incident there. And I know, Thomas, we've talked about this before in a couple of the symposiums, but that idea of there being kind of like a standing wave of energy that gets like static, like it gets charged up the way that it can, like when you like rub a balloon against your hair and then it can discharge that static. And sometimes I think that those incidents don't discharge fully. So sometimes there can be like not the actual person remaining, but like a facsimile of them, like of them at that time when she disappeared or when she died. And because I firmly believe in the concept of reincarnation. That's just kind of one of my fundamental tenets of spirituality, is that once you leave your body, you, the being, go on to pick up a new body. You come out screaming as a baby. Once you've left your body, you go through the in-between lives area and all that, and you kind of have an opportunity to pick out what your next incarnation is going to be to an extent, and then you end up in reincarnating. But that personality of the person can be left as an impression in an area where a traumatic incident occurred. Like when earlier this year, we took a trip out to David Oman's house where the Tate LaBianca murders occurred, and there's still impressions of those people as they existed as Sharon Tate, as J.C. Bring there.
Maybe it has something to do with how high the emotions are running at the time of the event, and that has to do with how long those impressions can stick around for. If it's very violent or very, emotions are running really high, that's the psychic energy that's happening at that point is pretty much as strong as it can get. And so that leaves a stronger imprint behind.
Yeah. And then I think there can be environmental factors too. Like if there's some sort of portal that these things occur on. Yeah. And so I wonder, I've Timothy, where did you say this was again? Somewhere northern. I want to say that's somewhere like Northern California. I want to say it's probably north, somewhere around Sacramento, I would imagine. But yes, there's got to be something about that area too. And it's just again, I think these things can stick around for a while, and it's not necessarily that person. Like she as that being that was in that body has moved on and reincarnated, but there can be a template of that person. A template of their persona, which again, we aren't our persona. We're not the what is it, the nephesh? When you're talking about the 3-part soul within Kabbalah, you've got the ruach, the nephesh, and the neshama. Is that right? And it's like
the same concept exists, but also in Nordic paganism.
Yeah,
there's
right.
3 parts to a soul.
Yeah, and there's that aspect which you pick up in an incarnation. That's your persona, the part that we're interacting with right now with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. When you said environmental, I was thinking, was the quartz in the ground? Was it something like that? The young kid who had this experience obviously has a great future as a psychic detective. The psychic detective thing, there's an assumption that, okay, they met the tormented soul of the departed. Because psychic detectives have had fantastic success over the decades. And that's why police compartments continue to use them. But, quietly they'll do it. But the thing is, I think, Jason, both of you nailed it then. The psychic shock is left in the environment of the horror that what that poor lady went through. And the young boy, for whatever reason, like psychic detectives, have a clairvoyancy that's capable of seeing it clearer than anyone else. And therefore, like in psychometry, where stones contain memories, like the stone tape idea, that this child saw, has the clairvoyant ability to see this. It's a very sad and tragic story, but it kind of like, it helps to bring, maybe these things exist so the little boy can say this and it'll bring closure to that woman's family. Well, she's no longer with us. She's not here. But yeah, I concur with that. That's a story that you can take lots of ways. It's very spooky. It's also kind of like, it's very, spiritually helpful in that it helps close the story. And also like the whole concept of that child's gift, The Shining or whatever it is, or like that movie that the Christopher Walken was in the dead zone, that kind of idea. But yeah, I think I concur with both of you on that. I'd say that's the reason.
Yeah, and what you're saying about quartz, Timothy, tell me the name of the city again.
Yeah.
Coarse.
Oh.
Not quartz.
What's it called again?
Coarse gold.
Coarse gold. The gold part. That's what I reminded me of, or that's what it reminded me of. If there's gold in the name of the city, and I know in Northern California, through most of California, I mean the Golden State, because this is where we talked about there was the gold rush in 1849 time frame. But anyway, where I was going with that is I want to say that I've heard that wherever there's gold, there are always veins of quartz, right?
Quartz, yeah.
Right. So I'm like, you talked about quartz there. We were talking about in Sasquatch in the documentary, the idea of these paranormal, I don't like using that word, but these kind of experiences occur where there's high concentrations of quartz, high strangeness. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where high God damn it. High strangeness.
Yeah, if that's where the gold rush took place, it'll be a quartz landscape.
Yep. So whether there's something piezoelectric, which is kind of what I was thinking about, if there's these layers of quartz that get pressed on like that, which creates some kind of DC electromagnetic field. Yeah. The
crystalline structure of quartz creates both electromagnetic and diamagnetic effects. And the diamagnetic effects of quartz are very prevalent in megaliths. Yeah, and that's why they're probably the big seams going through some of the stones. And so I think we probably might have solved that one. That it was a stone tape event of a horrible experience where someone's murder was charged into the localized environment, and we have a young child with a tremendous clairvoyant ability.
Yeah. Well, that's it. All right, everybody. See you next week. No.
All right.
I feel so bad for you guys coughing.
We're good. We're alive. We're still alive. This wouldn't have happened last week. I was dead. I was dead last week.
Troopers.
Yeah. Yeah. I am the undead. Yeah. Reanimator.
The weakened plague.
No shit. All right, excuse me. I'm sorry. It's gotta be fucking obnoxious. Okay. Have you all heard of the Dover demon? Okay. Well, we're gonna find out more about the Dover demon right now. The Dover demon is a small humanoid reported from Dover, Massachusetts. It was the subject of an intensive scare during the 1970s when multiple witnesses came forward with their sightings. The Dover demon is described as looking sort of like a gray variety of an alien, except that its skin has a rosy orange instead of a sickly gray. The Dover demon has a large head on a small stick-like body. It can be bipedal, but it often travels on all fours or switches back and forth between the two modes of locomotion. It has eyes that glow, sometimes orange, sometimes green. It does not seem to wear any clothing unless the clothing fits tightly and is the same color as its body. Unlike the Greys, the Dover demon does not seem to be associated with UFOs. It just wanders around on its own. Cryptozoologists seldom show interest in the Dover demon. Mainstream cryptozoologists are rarely willing to seriously investigate humanoids other than hairy humanoids. It seems that sightings only happened during a short time period, with most claiming that sightings have now ceased. so the Dover demon does not seem to be a pressing matter. The bizarre tale begins at 10:32 p.m. on April 21st as three 17-year-olds, Bill Bartlett, Mike Mazaka, and Andy Brody, are driving north on Farm Street. Bartlett, who's behind the wheel of the Volkswagen, spots something creeping along a low wall of loose stones on the left side of the road. At first, he thinks the image is a dog or a cat until his headlights shine on it and he realizes it's nothing that he's ever seen before. The figure slowly turns its head and stares into the light. Its two large, round, glassy, lidless eyes shining brightly, like two orange marbles. Its watermelon-shaped head, resting at the top of a thin neck, is the size of the rest of the body, except for its oversized head. The creature is thin, with long, spindly arms and legs, and large hands and feet. The skin is hairless and peach-colored and appears to have a rough texture, like wet sandpaper. Excuse me. Bartlett subsequently tells cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman, standing no more than 3.5 to 4 feet tall, the figure is shaped like a baby's body with long arms and legs. It has been making its way along the wall, its long fingers curling around the rocks when the car lights surprised it. Unfortunately, neither of Bartlett's companions sees the creature. The sighting lasts only a few seconds, and before Bartlett can speak, the car leaves the scene. The creature is gone, and Bartlett drops his friends off and goes to his Walpole Street home. Visibly upset, he walks through the door, and his father asks him what is wrong. Bartlett then relates the story and later sketches what he's seen. At around midnight, 15-year-old John Baxter leaves his girlfriend Kathy Cronin's house at the south end of Miller High Road. Then Baxter starts walking up the street on his way home. Half an hour later, after he has walked about a mile, he observes someone approaching him. Because the figure is short, Baxter assumes it's an acquaintance of his, M.G. Bouchard, who lives on the street. That sentence was written really weird. John calls out and no response. Baxter and the figure continue to approach each other until finally the latter stops. Baxter then halts as well and asks, "Who is that?" The sky is dark and overcast, and he can only see a shadowy form. Trying to get a better look, Baxter takes one step forward and the figure scurries off to the left, running down a shallow wooded gully and up the opposite bank. As the figure runs, Baxter hears its footsteps on the dry leaves. He follows the figure down the slope, then stops and looks across the gully. There he sees the creature, standing in silhouette about 30 feet away, its feet molded around the top of a rock, several feet from a tree. The creature's body reminds Baxter of a monkey, except for its dark figure 8 shaped head. Its eyes, two lighter spots in the middle of its head, are looking straight at Baxter, who after a few minutes begins to feel uneasy. Realizing he has never seen such a creature before and fearing what it might do next, he backs carefully up the slope, his heart pounding. He then walks very fast down the road to the intersection at Farm Street. There, a couple passing in a car pick him up and drive him home. Explanation. Skeptics usually claim that the Dover demon was simply a lost baby moose glimpsed under an unusual condition that made it seem like a bizarre humanoid that sometimes went on 4 legs. People who don't believe that explanation point out that all sightings happen during the wrong time of year for a moose that small to exist. And they also point out that Massachusetts is far from normal moose habitat. Even if such an orphan moose had been wandering around so closely to populated areas, it seems as if it would have been easily captured. If the explanatory power of the baby moose explanation appeals to you, then you could get around the worst objection by substituting a creature that does not actually exist in the area and can be born any time of the year, a baby calf. An orange-furred orphan calf would be a more likely candidate for such a proposal than a baby moose. Other suggested explanations include a monkey, a dog, an alien, mutation, or simply a hoax. Another explanation could be that it is an escaped and illegal to own pet gibbon. Some species of gibbon have orange babies. White-cheeked gibbons have an orange color in females. Did you pop that picture up of it? Oh, cool. A couple things I thought about. First thing I thought about was Gollum from Lord of the Rings. with the eyes and the way he's describing his skin and everything. But the other thing that it made me think about was been rewatching a series lately called Hellier. I don't know, Thomas, if you've seen Hellier. There's 2 seasons out. You can watch them both on Prime. That was an old show.
I think it's synchronistic though that the folks that do Hellier, they have a show called, or they used to have a show called, was it The Week in Weird? So just kind of synchronistic here. We've got The Week in Strange, and we've been watching Hellier again, and just that their show is called The Week in Weird, and we're doing The Week in Strange here. Okay, but yeah, no, it's just
another synchronicity. Is I was just about to eat a bar of Galaxy, and it's the same color as that creature.
Oh yeah,
orange and white.
What if it tastes like that creature?
It's just very nice English chocolate. Yeah. That's just well. You mean, here we go again. Does anyone know where Dover is in Massachusetts, east or west?
No,
because Massachusetts has a lot of paranormal stuff going along with it. You know, there's that, I think it's called the Bridgewater Triangle it's a big forest between Massachusetts. I've been in actually between Massachusetts and Rhode Island. That is a paranormal massive hotspot. And then there's the Western Massachusetts around the Housatonic River and the tunnel. There's massive paranormal events around there too as well. So it's a very charged state. Mm-hmm. And that thing, Gollum was the first thing I thought of when Timony, when she mentioned it. But is it in Eastern or Western Massachusetts?
Eastern.
Yeah, that's Eastern. It looks like it's right below Boston. Off to so it's in the Bridgewater, probably close to the Bridgewater Triangle area, which is a paranormal hotspot. And there's a very good documentary about it on YouTube if you look for it. A very well made one. I mean, again, here we are, like the Sasquatch film last night. You have your localized entities that, for whatever reason, charge themselves in a particular form within the area. Yeah. Do you know how Gollum came about? And J.R. Tolkien was working as a sitting professor at University College Galway, and he visited a place in Ireland called the Burren, which is full of caves. And in one of the caves is a demon called the Gollum, and that's where he got the idea from. So we know that part of Massachusetts, a lot of Irish immigrants ended up there. So who knows? They may have transported the archetype across the Atlantic and it reformed in a different way. But it's a really good story actually. That it's got that kind of Mothman sort of narrative about it, doesn't it?
So there's so many coincidences and synchronicity. So as we're watching Hellier, they're talking about going into this cave system, a mammoth cave system in Kentucky, which has a lot of that same folklore history. And what they're searching for are what the legend has called them is the Kentucky goblins. And it's the same type of description, 3 feet high, smallish feet, three-toed feet. And again, there's crystal and there's quartz and there's all kinds of stuff that run throughout that caving system. And so it was interesting, the synchronicities with all of that. And you mentioned caves. There seems to be something really primordial and subconscious about caves, why these things exist and manifest in caves, this type of manifestation.
In Western Massachusetts, there's a tunnel, a railroad tunnel called the Housatonic or something like that tunnel. And it cuts through into New York State through the mountains. And there was very many deaths during its construction. It took a long time to make. And there was a video that an engineer in a caboose shot in the 80s or 90s going through that tunnel. And he had good lights pointing backwards as the train was moving through or forward, whatever. And there's one point where this white thing that looks much like this thing in Dover runs across the train tracks and into an alcove. And people were saying that's just a paper bag or a plastic bag being blown by the train, but it doesn't, and the video wasn't put up for that reason. It was put up because train heads could see the inside of train fans could see the inside of the tunnel because it's so inaccessible. And yet people said at such and such a number, did you not see the demon? So, and it looks a lot, it's snow white and it moves really fast and strangely. Yeah, I mean, here we go again, the local archetype. Yeah, it's a great story. The story really has it all, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it just really makes me wonder, like there's got to be pretty much everywhere on the planet, there's got to be these local archetypes that manifest themselves in this way. And there's always going to be the good majority of normies who can't accept anything beyond their physical senses, who will just look for that explanation of it being a paper bag or a giant ape creature or something, but or
Yeah.
baby moose, right? And they can't
Well,
yeah.
this would
And
be
they
one
don't,
of these stories that'd be good to follow up to see if there's like Men in Black at these teenagers or something.
yeah. Right. And just, but yeah, that's another phenomenon, just like with the Mothman stuff, with the Hellier stuff, with the Sasquatch stuff, with the alien stuff. There's always this Men in Black phenomena too, of these people who are like quasi official agents of the government or something that end up showing up, and they're always not quite right.
And they're really strange.
Oh man. Yeah. Which reminds me of a few days ago when I was working, I was picking up food at this Mexican restaurant, and there was these two folks in there who, if I were to consider to be Men in Black types, that there's a couple, there's a man and a woman, really well dressed, but just so fucking out of place for this restaurant. Oh, they were like I would say almost 7 feet tall, just huge, tall. And I would say they were probably in their 60s, but just really good, in really, really good shape. Like the man had this really, he had a real angular kind of, he almost looked like otherworldly, and his cheeks were really sunken in, and he had this just dead ass glare on his face. And same with the woman that he was with, and they're in these really, really expensive pressed wool coats that you would expect to wear like if you're in New England or something in the wintertime. And it was like, I don't know, 50 maybe 60 degrees that day, just totally overdressed. Like it looked like they were dressed for snow. And they were at this shitty, really shitty wannabe Mexican food place, that just like, you wouldn't think this type of person would be stopping there in the middle of the day to eat some like wannabe Mexican food that, and it's just this weird phenomenon. I was looking at them like, yeah, there's something so out of place about these people and just their vibe around them. You know how like when you can be around someone, you can read their vibe really easily, and if they fit in or not. These people were just so out of place, like they didn't belong there. They felt like you could tell that they're very self-conscious about themselves too, but it's just that thing where they weren't quite right. They look like they're trying to fit in, but it's like, maybe fitting in from a different era, from a different location. It's like, oh, this is how humans are supposed to look, right? we'll go to the local place where they find their food and we'll blend in just like them, is kind of what it felt like. But it's just, the whole thing was really off. And then just the fact that they were so gigantically tall and otherworldly looking.
I definitely had a Men in Black experience. I'll talk about it another time. I won't take it up now, but I just want to say something. I think because of the lockdown, I think we've had definitely an increase of, and you said you don't like the word paranormal, but 40 and psychic awareness. Because do you remember when the first lockdown happened? All the mainstream media stories all about, well, why is everyone's dream so strange right now? It was almost like the veil had been torn open for something new to come in. And I think we're actually in a kind of an amplified psychic world right now. And I've been feeling it very strongly the last few days since I came here. And I've had to look at things from a different angle. And synchronicities are not just synchronicities. They're like literally facts. They're so strange how they're happening rapidly. But yeah, I think we're opening, the door is open a little wider right now, definitely because of the lockdowns and stuff. And we've all been brought to these new experiences. And that's it. I can't disagree with that at all.
I had an experience one time. I'll just say it really quickly. I could go into a whole long thing about it, but years ago, it was my first time really traveling across country, and I was traveling with a partner, and we were living in a van, and we were camping in all of these really amazing places, like down in Arkansas, and loaded with quartz, and just reading, all kinds of material. And this was before I had a smartphone, so I didn't have the internet, and it was the first time I think I really dedicated 2 solid straight years of just like tearing into this material. So to make a very long story short, we ended up running out of money, and we had to get jobs in Louisville, Kentucky. So I got a job working at a health food store, and it was my first week on the job, maybe like my 3rd day working. I didn't know anybody here. And I was in the back one day, I was working in the grocery department. So I was working in the back, and one of the guys from up front came back and they were like, hey, somebody's up here and they're looking for you. And which didn't make any sense because I didn't know anybody. And so I was like, okay, I'll be right there. I went to the front and there was nobody there. So I went back and found the employee that had relayed the message. And I was like, well, what did they look like? And he said, well, he was probably about 7 foot tall. If I had to, like, if I've ever seen somebody albino, this guy was albino. And I was like, that's a very strange description. I don't know. I've never met anybody in my life that looks like that. And I said, well, what did he say? He asked me for me by my name. And he said, yeah, he said, is Timony working? And I just want to know if she's okay. And then he disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll give you my one real quick. I did my first TV appearance in 2012 with Enoch Crane in a place called Milton Keynes in the center, in the middle, south middle of England. And it was a TV show on Channel 200 called, I don't know, I think it was called or something like that, but it was really popular. And it was my first TV experience talking about psychopaths and my book, Puzzling People. We went to a pub afterwards in the town, and there was a guy who was about 6 foot something trying to be an Englishman. By that I mean he was wearing a bowler hat, and this is like not a town where that goes on, and holding an umbrella and had a pinstripe suit. I was standing holding the umbrella like this, like he was from the 1950s or something, and staring at me all the whole time like this, going. And I was with a guy called Johnny P, a friend of mine, and he was looking behind me at him, and I said nothing, and he says, "There's that guy over there. He's really weird, and he's not moved the whole time, not bought a drink, and he's just sitting there staring at you in the same position with that weird smile on his face." And I think looking back at that now, that was that.
That's
Men in
really
Black type
creepy.
thing.
Was he very tall? Could you tell?
Yeah, he was. But the thing was, it was almost like, and John Keel said this in his book, they tried to fit in, but they don't quite make it. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like it had a kind of a stereotypical view of what an Englishman should look like. So it says, well, he carries an umbrella, he wears a bowler hat, you know, and like a 1950s kind of look, and a black pinstripe suit with a white shirt and a red tie. And he was sitting
like
there,
the most basic format of a stereotypical.
Yeah, like, you know, the Monty Python, the Ministry of Silly Walks, those guys. And I'm convinced that was Milton Keynes is not that type of England, you know. So it was definitely that. I mean, looking back on it now, it couldn't have been that. It was that experience, you know. And then he just vanished. He vanished. He was gone.
Yeah,
like not in front of our eyes. You look around 1 second and there was no sign of him. He was gone.
Right. And it's just interesting that the three of us, they're all tall. They all don't fit in quite right. They're looking like they're trying to fit in. And this just reminds me of a mythology I've heard about before, that as far as extraterrestrials go, as far as other life forms, a type of other life forms that live on another planet that are human, that come from, I think it's the tail star of the Big Dipper. They are these people who are in a somewhat like communist 1950s era, really run down, kind of like Thomas, the way you've talked about the fairy realm before, where it's like everything is like Soviet era, like really shitty cars and everything. But there are these group of people that live in this very oppressed universe, and they all wear that kind of like fedora hat, suit and tie, and where like the lampposts are all like spyware implementation. So they live in this like really controlled, locked down, draconian style, draconian rule kind of place. But it's that they actually live somewhere out in the tail star of the Big Dipper. So if there are an extraterrestrial group of humans out there that they live, that they look just like us, and they dress like, you know, the Men in Black, like Will Smith and what's his name, Tommy Lee Jones, like they dress in suits like that, but they live in this terribly suppressed kind of communist era 1950s society, where everything is like kind of film noir type, but in real life, where it's just this totally rundown place, and there's somehow an interdimensional group of beings that cross over between our reality and theirs, but they do live someplace else, and there's like a Stargate kind of thing that,
Yeah.
overlaps their world with ours, and that some of the shit that we've brought in that has been brought into our reality here with socialism, communism, and all of that, and some of the weird ways, the weird things we've done with clothing and men's fashion in particular, have come from that civilization that live in the tail star of the Big Dipper. But again, this is just some kind of weird, spooky mythology stuff. But we're right here after Samhain, in talking about spooky shit. So
yeah, it's the weak and strange. We can talk about anything we want, bring in anything we want.
Yeah. Life and strange, yeah. But anyway, yeah, it just reminded me like that these types always have the like suit and tie look.
Yeah, that's it. So it'd be great if someone followed this story up and interviewed those teenagers, and they did have these Men in Black things going on.
All right. This one made the rounds a little bit ago, but I wanted to talk about it on here because I want to hear all of our perspectives put together in one spot. So Queen Elizabeth I's confidant uses mirror with Aztec origins for occult practices. A close confidant of Queen Elizabeth I used an obsidian mirror with Aztec origins to contact otherworldly spirits in his occult practices, according to new research. John Dee was a Renaissance polymath during the 16th century who was interested in astronomy, alchemy, and mathematics. Stuart Campbell, an archaeology professor at the University of Manchester, said in a press release. Later, he became involved in divination and the occult, seeking to talk to angels through the use of scryers. Whoa, my phone just freaked out.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on.
That's pretty cool.
Okay. That was really weird. Okay. Later, he became involved in divination and the occult, seeking to talk to angels through the use of scryers who used artifacts like mirrors and crystals. One of those scryers, a tool used to see or predict the future, was an obsidian mirror that has long been suspected of having Aztec origins. But with no records to show how Dee obtained it, it was difficult to prove. Until Campbell and his team of international scientists used geochemical analysis to reveal the mirror's origins. To do this, they studied 4 objects currently housed in the British Museum: Dee's mirror, 2 other Aztec mirrors, and a polished rectangular obsidian slab. Then they bombarded the mirrors with X-rays, resulting in the objects also emitting X-rays, which allowed the scientists to measure the artifact's composition. The researchers described these X-rays as unique fingerprints that can be compared to other obsidian artifacts to trace the origins of the materials. Excuse me. According to the findings published in the Journal of Antiquity, all 4 of the obsidian artifacts studied were made from Mexican obsidian exploited by the Aztecs. Dee's mirror, specifically, along with another with a similar design, originated from near Pachuca in Mexico. The scientists said obsidian, an igneous rock occurring as a natural glass formed by rapid cooling of lava from volcanoes, had a spiritual significance to the Aztecs. It was used as part of medicinal practices as a shield against bad spirits and to capture souls on its reflective surface. The rock's symbolic value may have had them appealing items. The rock's symbolic value may have made them appealing items for Europeans to collect and bring home as they conquered the Aztecs in the 16th century. The researchers theorized that the mirrors were also often viewed as magical artifacts in Europe at that time as well, which may have served as additional motivation. The 16th century was a period in which new exotic objects were being brought to Europe from the New World and opening up exciting new possibilities in the intellectual world of the period. The scientists said the Aztec mirrors were novel and exotic items that found a place in many early collections in Europe. They suggested stories about the mirrors may have been why Dee chose to include this one in his occult practice. Sorry about the music.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm always real fascinated with the John Dee stuff and with scrying and the Enochian entities and everything. This is something that always has really interested me. And I think you too, Thomas, right?
I think this is the story, the kind of story you long to hear. Yeah. It's just fantastic. I mean, John Dee getting an Aztec obsidian disc scrying mirror, and these things were actually very central to Aztec life. They were sold in markets. Now, you remember when he got his hands on this, it was only the Spanish were only barely exploring that part of the world, and England and Spain were at war. So the chances of him picking this thing up through a Spanish source would absolutely be zero. And I'm starting to think maybe he had one beforehand that somehow got into Europe, maybe God knows how many years earlier, because there was just no contact other than guns and bombs between the English and the Spanish. And the Spanish and the Portuguese too, had the exclusive ownership really of South America and Central America. And the English didn't even have a navy at this time. So he had invented it. This is one of these stories that you just like live for if you're interested in this stuff. I mean, it'd be like, I don't know, how the hell did John Dee get his hand on this thing? How did he know the significance of it? And this is a staggering mystery. I just absolutely was delighted when I read the story last week.
So what just happened on my phone is weird because, Black Mirror type thing.
Yeah.
I was reading it, and as soon as I said the word scryer, it like did this weird glitch thing. And then, you know how if you accidentally scroll too fast, it just kind of the page goes up real fast. It did that, but it went up and down really quickly. And then I lost my place, and it did that weird thing where there's like lines across the screen. So,
and this story arrives around the time that we were talking about making a film about John Dee.
Yep.
It's just this was perfect. This throws a whole new dimension into it.
Yeah, I can't remember how old I was the first time I learned about John Dee, but it's been at least 20 years that I've just been obsessed and just so enamored, and I can't get enough of his stories and the work that they did.
All the girls love the Dee.
Yeah. The Dee. The D. We love the D. Yeah, I set myself up for that. That was really good.
I did. No, but it's true. I know where you're coming from. He is an
like the D too
character. I think one of the reasons people like him, or regular folks like us are attracted to him, is he comes across as a really cool guy. He doesn't come across as like an asshole from history. He comes across as like a pretty cool guy from history.
The original 007.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got that big D energy.
Yeah.
But you know what I always think is real fascinating about these artifacts is this idea that perhaps some of this technology could have been left around from before the last ice age. And if we talk about there being kind of civilization cycles and some of the Graham Hancock stuff, where if this was an artifact from Central America, that perhaps the Central American folks who had them in this current iteration post ice age, they were artifacts from the last time around, and that yes, some of these could have made their way around the world, and it would be it'd be like somebody discovering an intact brand new iPhone or something after the next ice age, and it's still having an ability to work, or like a record player, like a phonograph or something that could withstand.
And remember too, the Aztecs are a kind of an inheritance culture.
That's right.
They didn't build those pyramids in Mexico. And then it's quite likely they didn't come up with these obsidian mirrors.
Right.
This was the original Toltec thing before them, which seems to have been a very ancient, long-lasting culture. So it's just a fantastic mystery.
Right. The pre-ice age, just like, the heads on Easter Island, just everywhere. There's these megalithic culture civilizations that seem to have been around from a long ass time ago. And but no, that just fascinates me that there had to have been some sort of high technology that was probably destroyed in the ice age, but there had to be remnants of it that had made their way into collectors and people, and the royalty who would have people going out there, their navies. But like you're saying, there wasn't a British navy until John Dee.
There was no Royal Navy until Dee had this vision to build it from the wood of every sacred forest in these islands. It was really remarkable stuff.
Yeah.
This is when I love when modern day scientists and researchers like to get involved in this type of thing, because he did a really cool thing with that. He wasn't trying to to debunk or be, put it down or downplay it at all. He could see the value in what he was doing, and coming out with this information, it gives us occult addicts, something to just chew on and devour and just totally go down a whole new rabbit hole with it.
Yeah, well, but Benjamin Woolley, who wrote a really good biography of John Dee, he outlined all this stuff in his book, and he's not on our side by any means, but he did in the past, that stuff was always left out. It was like, always. It wasn't that important. It was spooky shit. It wasn't important, but he kept it all in. Another author that did this was the guy who wrote the biography of William Butler Yeats, Robert Elliman, and this is back in the 60s, and he kept all the Yeats' Golden Dawn and mystical experiences in his bio. So it's in recent times, there's been a thing like, Isaac Newton. Well, he wasn't really into the occult, and now we know he was an alchemist who dabbled in science rather than the other way around.
Right.
And it's great to see that more and more there are mainstream biographers are willing to indulge this stuff without either suppressing it or laughing at it.
They kind of sum it up. How they tell us we've got junk DNA and all that stuff. It's like they throw those parts out. That's junk history. That's the spooky shit. We're just not going to deal with that. So I love it when accredited people, whatever you'd want to say, scholars, come out with stuff like this. It's validating. Not that we need it, but it's still cool.
Yeah, this story is a dream come true for folks like us.
I think it's great too, like what you're just talking about, scholars and researchers. We are this current we are the scholars of this current era. We're the scholars and researchers, and the people here in the tribe, and the people that follow our work and that have some really nice things to contribute. All the other people making videos here in the group, we're the people doing real research, because there's no one behind us throwing money at us to push a certain agenda. Yeah, right. Or even like, here, look in this direction, here's a grant. Because a lot of times that's what happens. Somebody wants an entity of some sort, a public facing entity of some sort, wants a certain agenda to be pushed. So they'll find researchers and give them grants and give them stipends to live off of, so that they will come to a discovery that they want everybody to buy into. And that's not us. We're not making any money off of this. Somebody's not having an agenda for us to push. We're just looking at the stuff that interests us.
When it's big money stuff, it comes with a kind of an editorialization that you must end with this. Right. And so here's a bag of money. Now make a documentary or a film. Yeah. Well, we get Patreon money from our subscribers, and thank you very much. And please continue to support us on Patreon. As you saw from the Sasquatch documentary, we had stunning footage and even actors and stuff. That stuff was expensive, and you guys paid for that. But that was only to enhance the artistic nature of the film. And so we don't have an agenda. You gave us you gave us the money in Patreon in order to let us do what we want to do, because you wanted to. Right. Yeah. And that's so, but we all three of us have already decided that if ever some corporate entity offered us the money, it'd either be they have no editorial control and we're left alone, fair enough, but we'd have to have charge of every single part of the process. Otherwise, we have YouTube, and there's other ways of making and getting videos out there. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's like, the Patreon supporters and everyone makes it possible for these films to be made. And it's like, we'll just continue to do that and continue doing exactly what we want to do, so that you guys can see it, so that everybody out there can see this stuff. Because that's the only reason why we're doing it. All of this is we love these topics. We love these personalities that we talk about. And it's just, that's the real research. Like Tim. Oh yeah. It's a true labor of love. Right. And that's how the real scholarly work gets done, is when you have people who actually passionately have a love for the topic. And, that we're finding common threads between some of these stories and, some of the stuff that we've covered here in the Week in Strange, where it's just like, making connections to events throughout history that we wouldn't have made connections through, and seeing these similar things about the quartz, the earth changes and the earth cycles. It's just, another one of those things that keeps coming back, is this idea of cyclical civilizations that rise and fall with basically, earth cataclysms that are just, as common as the seasons changing. So these threads, they're all kind of putting one big
tapestry together that we're building.
Yeah.
All right, Thomas.
We have even considered hiring helicopters and airplanes. That's how serious we are.
Yeah.
And we'll do it.
So if any of you all have a plug on all that, send it our way.
Yeah.
Are you ready to hit us with psychic weather? The
Yeah.
psychic weather?
Let it roll.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Good evening and good morning, wherever you are. Here's the psychic weather with me, Thomas Sheridan, and it's a very positive one. We had tremendous solar storms over the last couple of days, and it has definitely brought the winds of change to the world. I can feel a different direction coming in. A lot of us are feeling very creative. A lot of us are getting new ideas and, not stuck in the mud. And we've decided to move on regardless of the ways of the material world and the burdens it imposes upon us. There was the storms hit on Samhain morning in this part of the world and basically ran till yesterday, this morning. So nearly 24 hours, they were bashing on the magnetosphere. So the entire planet got a good whack of this thing, pushing on the magnetosphere, then pushing on the actual atmosphere and causing these weather changes. I think this massive solar storm that came, I know it did. It's actually brought some new energies to the planet, badly needed new energies that we don't know. Is this what triggers evolution? Is this what triggers changes? Is this where things like the Renaissance come from? We know these things do happen, but absolutely we've entered into a very positive cycle. Lots of us are feeling better. Lots of us are feeling creative. I know you guys are not feeling the well physically, but when you're better, you will be more creative. And that's the week in psychic weather. It's that simple. The winds of positive change, psychic and cosmic, are blowing right across us, and get out there and do things.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Yeah, I really like that, Thomas, especially because it's like, I think it was the last time you did the psychic weather. There was another solar storm that was kind of it brought about a lot of Renfielding out of people. I definitely saw that there's just terrible psychological and effect around people with driving in particular, and all the weird shit that people have been really aggressive that last time. But this one, you're right, it brings about a new creative energy with it, something that's on the other end of the spectrum of, kind of a, rather than it being like an inward energy, the way the last one was, which caused the Renfielding, this is more of like an outward, an oppositely charged type of psychic phenomena, where it's like the people that have the creative outlets, that people who have outlets to put this energy into, they'll be able to discharge that energy, where people who don't have the outlets might Renfield because of it. They might start going insane because they don't paint, they don't make music, they don't make films, they don't write, they don't do poetry, they don't play ball or whatever it is that they do to get the charge out of them. So they develop a capacitance for it, and these people that have a capacitance, they don't have any outlet to discharge that to, so it zaps out in weird, strange ways, or causes illnesses, or we could keep going on and on and on about that. But that's what I see, is that if people who have an outlet for it, that energy can go into something and kindle a new fire for new projects as we've passed here through the veil, right? It's kind of almost like this is almost like a midway through the year, or a new year here as we pass through the veil after Samhain, and some sort of a midway point where we're crossing over a threshold moment and have new opportunities here, and a new moon coming up Thursday.
Yeah, the previous solar weather had a ghastly energy. It was awful. And this one is the complete opposite. So there's a kind of a balancing yin yang kind of thing. And you cannot move into change unless you're balanced. So maybe this is the balancing course.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Once we're not sick anymore, be really looking forward to taking advantage of these new energies and the new waves. And I still have felt very creative and very inspired, and the synchronicities are still going. Just been physically fucking drained, just from not feeling well. But but yeah, I think tomorrow is a new day. Okay, so this one's exciting. Hundreds of ancient Maya sites hidden under Mexico reveal a mysterious blueprint. You can't see them from the surface, but they're definitely there. Scientists have revealed the discovery of hundreds of ancient ceremonial sites, many of which belong to the Maya civilization, hiding in plain sight just underneath the landscape of modern-day southern Mexico. The largest of these structures, called Aguadilla Phoenix, was announced by archaeologists last year, representing the oldest and biggest monument of the ancient Maya ever found. But the complex clearly was not alone. In a new study, an international team of researchers led by anthropologist Takeshi Inumata from the University of Arizona reports the identification of almost 500 ceremonial complexes, tracing back not just to the Maya, but also to another Mesoamerican civilization who made their mark on the land even earlier, the Olmecs. As with the discovery of Aguada Phoenix, the sites identified in the new analysis, 478 in total, were found the same way, using LiDAR, which combs the land with lasers during an aerial survey, detecting three-dimensional archaeological structures buried beneath vegetation and other surface features. In this case, the LiDAR data were already publicly available, courtesy of Mexico's National Institute of Statistics and Geography, and covering a sprawling 85,000 square kilometer area, about 33,000 square miles. When Inumata and his team analyzed the data set, they identified hundreds of ceremonial sites scattered across the Mexican states of Tabasco and Veracruz, most of them previously unknown. Most of the new discoveries are much smaller than the sprawling Aguada Phoenix, which measures over 1,400 meters in length and at its greatest extent, But even so, seeing them for the first time reveals a mysterious design influence that hadn't been fully appreciated before in Maya structures. According to the researchers, a previously unseen layout in the ancient Olmec city, San Lorenzo, the oldest Olmec urban center, dating to around 1150 BCE, can be seen as a recurring motif in later structures built by the Maya, which echoes San Lorenzo's central rectangular space, adopting its spatial template. People always thought San Lorenzo was very unique and different from what came later in terms of site arrangement, says Inumata. But now we show that San Lorenzo is very similar to Aguada Phoenix. It has a rectangular plaza flanked by edge platforms. This tells us that San Lorenzo is very important for the beginning of some of these ideas that were later used by the Maya. If so, the architecture at work here reveals an important link between these two distinct civilizations, which partially overlapped in time, but also peaked in different chapters of Mesoamerican history, with the Olmecs flourishing in what's known as the formative period from 2000 BCE to 250 CE, while the Maya grew in dominance and structural ingenuity in the classic period, 250 to 900 CE. The rectangular complex design, which the team calls the middle formative Usu Masinata MFU pattern, and its related variants, suggests interregional interactions and influences between the Olmecs and the Maya were more complicated and diverse than we realized. The presence of this previously unrecognized pattern implies that the emergence of standardized ceremonial complexes in southern Mesoamerica was more complex than previously thought. In addition to analyzing the LiDAR data, the team also conducted preliminary ground observations on foot at 62 of the sites, which on the whole are estimated to date from around 1050 to 400 BCE, and are thought to have been used as ritual spaces where people gather to meet and to watch processions. Some of the sites are oriented to align to the sunrise on certain dates in Mesoamerican calendars, suggesting the ritual processes involved cosmological concepts tied to the movements of the seasons. This means that they were representing cosmological ideas through these ceremonial spaces. In this space, people gathered according to the ceremonial calendar. While there is still much we don't yet understand about the significance, history, and evolution of these hundreds of ritual complexes, with the discoveries posing years of investigations ahead for archaeologists and anthropologists, it's clear the Olmecs and the Maya may have shared more than we realized, literally building their societies and cities alongside one another. There has always been debate over whether Olmec civilization led to the development of the Maya civilization or if the Maya developed independently. So our study focuses on a key area between the two. Okay, so we already tied this into the other story with the gold and the obsidian mirror and the Aztecs and the Toltecs and the Olmecs. So that was not planned. Again, another great synchronicity. These things are just blowing like solar flares. I found that story fascinating. I've been to one of the Mayan ruins. I've been to Chichen Itza before, and it's unfortunate now there's a lot of it that's inaccessible. At the top of Chichen Itza, there's a life-size jade jaguar that's still up there. You used to be able to walk up to the top of it and see it. You can't anymore because people were vandalizing it and trying to steal things. But the power that you feel on these places, even though now it's overrun with tourists and people trying to sell things, it really doesn't diminish the power of what's in these places. And we just know so much or so little about what they were doing, but we know people like us, these are ritual spaces. I mean, that was obvious to most of us. But to find complexes this large, with previously unknown motifs and the patterns, the pattern part is really what I'm very interested in. Patterns play such a role in what type of ceremony you're doing and how it's conducted and what the goal is and how it's aligned and everything. So anyway.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this is just fascinating, the tie-in that you were talking about there, Thomas, about, this being the Mayans being built on top of a previous civilization of the Olmecs. And just, I know that sometimes when the mainstream academic types look at this, they kind of try to oversimplify some of this, which I know we've seen in our history books a little bit, but it's like the respect to be paid, the reverence to be paid to these ancient civilizations. Like these are high civilizations we're talking about. And I know that there's just this tendency to dilute it down, but it would just be really great to kind of, again, maybe eventually make our way down into Central America and make a film about this so we can give it the proper love and respect the way that we do with our films, because it's like the very sterile, detached, overly pragmatic approach that the academics give to things never gives it justice the way that somebody who's a magician or somebody who's a mystic can do. The way Timothy just described these
or
things.
someone who's interested in megaliths. Yeah,
right. And the way Timothy just described that is just, it's so much more rich and interesting than just the way that the academics have this cold, detached kind of fact and figure and fact based things. Yeah.
The
right.
The fact that this, they discovered this thing now, and recently they discovered an enormous complex in Guatemala. It seems to me that, say, between southern Mexico and Panama, from the ruins that we found that they're turning up and the cities that are being found in the jungle, and I've known people from that part of the world who said there's so much stuff that no one even talks about, that was obviously a powerhouse of the world when you think about it. And it makes sense too, because it's the narrowest point in the Americas where the Atlantic, well, the Gulf of Mexico, but it's part of the Atlantic, and the Pacific meet. So in an ancient trading civilization there, and they have found statues of little statuettes of elephants, which don't live in Central or South America, in Guatemala, would suggest that was a massive hub of civilization moving across between the Atlantic and the Pacific. It's right there. It's why they built the Panama Canal 100 years ago, for that reason. Now, another thing too is thank God for the trees, because the trees and the forests are hiding this stuff. It's probably what kept them from being destroyed and cut down for not pulled down by farmers and stuff on, or agricultural land. I went with Neil MacDonald today to the Thornborough Henges in Yorkshire, which is 3 gigantic circles that run across the Yorkshire landscape. And the one that's the most intact is the one that's actually buried in a forest. The tree is not only kept it safe, but also the roots of the trees acted like the grass, seagrass on a sand dune and held the shapes intact. And, the forest has actually kept these places alive. I think they're going to be discovering massive, complex ruins in that part of the world for generations to come. And it's a part of the world that doesn't get its fair shake. We hear about Egypt and we hear about, even this part of the world. You don't hear an awful lot about that part of the world in terms of its amazing influence. But I think it's like a powerful past experience that's starting to scream to us now. Not only this one, but it's even more significant, the huge one that was discovered in Guatemala.
It's funny you mentioned Egypt, Thomas, because I was literally just about to take things over onto another continent, to Africa. The idea that in the Saharan desert that everything's covered in sand there, and I want to say, when you're talking about going through Morocco and North Africa there, and those areas where underneath those sands there's got to be ruins just everywhere, because they dug the Sphinx out of the sand, but it's just like it would be really difficult to move that sand out of the way. But I'd imagine if some of that Saharan sand was moved out of the way, there'd be some just amazing shit found there. But it's probably keeping everything in place. The sand is the same way that like the canopies of trees there in South and Central and South America do. But it's just it would take another, I don't know, the Sahara would have to be covered in water again probably to even move some of that out of the way. But it's just the people, and there's always been really interesting people. Didn't even William Butler Yeats pass through Morocco at one point in his life? Was it William Butler Yeats that lived there at one point in Morocco? No. Okay, well, there's
Morocco. I don't think so. Maybe, but we know Crowley went into Libya. Why did he go to summon Qurans on? Why did he go into the Libyan desert? What did he know it was below there?
Right. I think there's some real I've always really been drawn to that part of the planet or that part of the continent of Africa there with Morocco, Libya, that whole western side of northwestern part of Africa. I wanted to take a trip there to Morocco and through all that just to kind of see
the Berbers and stuff. Yeah. The thing is, the desiccation of the Sahara Desert is 2500 BC. That's a very important date. That's when Stonehenge was built, and other thing, and many other megaliths were built around that. Well, we're told they're built around then. The Dogon people of Western Africa, who were the ones who knew that Sirius was a binary star, claimed to be descendant of the original Proto-Egyptians, not the Pharaonic Egyptians.
Right.
And they had crossed from across where the Sahara Desert is now, when it was a savanna and a woodlands. So there has to be colossal ruins buried under those sand dunes in the middle of the Sahara.
Yeah. That probably look so similar to what we're talking about here in Central and South America. A similar culture, the way we'd have similar architecture in the East and the West.
What I find remarkable is in a country like Mexico, which is pretty fairly developed and heavily populated, that this could even sneak under the radar.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you what else is out there in places like Honduras, Guatemala, Belize, and Panama that still has to be found.
Yeah, and it's just I think over time a lot of this stuff wants to be covered up so that the time scale of things, that whether it's the Jesuits or whether it's the Vatican or whomever wants to keep a certain time scale and a certain narrative for whatever their purposes are, they will do that, and where funnel money into making sure that the academics say that these were just simple people who they weren't in high civilization. They just look at it very cold, pragmatic, and detached, where they're just looking at figures and weighing weights and measurements of things without putting any heart into it, so that people don't find an interest in these topics. But here, talking about it in the way that you do, the way that I do, the way that Timony does, it's like bringing it allows for people to find an interest in these topics again, rather than it just being
these places they discover. You will find if you went to the local farmers and the local folks who lived around there, they knew they were already there. It's just that no one speaks to the locals or dismisses them when they say something. Oh yeah, there's a city in the forest, and they go, the academics do that kind of thing, and that's been going on a long time. There was a Welsh antiquarian called Lund who visited Ireland in 1699, I think was the year. And he was out at Newgrange, and he was convinced that Newgrange was a Roman or a Viking constructor and it wasn't that old. And he stumbled upon a farmer called McCarthy who lived nearby. And the farmer told him, "Oh no, you're all wrong. That was an ancient temple to the goddess Angus, the god Angus Og, which is the Celtic god of romantic love and poetry. And every time on the solstice, the sun shines down the tunnel and illuminates the interior chamber." And your man Lund wrote it as this guy McCormack, a local fruitcake, eccentric peasant, said that some kind of barbarous pagan operation happens on the solstice revolving the sun, and laughed it off. And lo and behold, in the 1960s, they discovered that the sun shines through the passageway and illuminates the back of the chamber on the winter solstice. And then later on, documents were discovered written by Christian monks that the actual mound was the birthplace of the god of poetry and romantic love, Angus Og. So this farmer McCarthy, who's laughed at by this antiquarian academic in 1699, told the truth of what was the whole place was about. But because he was just a dumb peasant, what did he know? And the same thing would happen in Guatemala and Mexico and all these other places where the local folks would say, "No, out there in the forest, there's loads of stuff." And the scientists go, "They'll never change. They'll never change."
Yeah, and that's why just fuck them. You know, their paradigm is coming to an end, as it's like, you know, school systems are failing. Teachers are having to. This is another interesting thing that I'm sure Christian would enjoy weighing in on this in the next pub. But this idea, especially in the United States, where teachers are having to buy their own supplies, and it's just like, I remember, you know, when we were going to school when we were young, it's like teachers had a certain stipend, I want to say, where there was materials that were provided to them to an extent, but it's like teachers are having to. They're underpaid, underappreciated, in, you know, overworked, underappreciated. I think I said overappreciated, underappreciated, and having to fork out so much of their own money for curriculums. And it's just like that curriculum that's being given through academia and through the, you know, the machine that is the Western academic system. That paradigm's dying. You know, it's no longer relevant for, you know, someone to go through elementary, middle, and high school and then go off to community college or go off to college, a university, so that they can get some kind of fucking job afterwards. That it's like that paradigm might have existed around 1950, 1960, but it's like it's going on 60 years after that now, where all that people realize is that it's such a mountain of debt to get into, to go to university, to you know, study something totally irrelevant you're not going to be able to find any work in nowadays. So my whole point with that is being that paradigm is dying. These academics who looked at things from a cold, detached point of view, their whole audience is being washed away. You know, there's no outlet for them anymore to be able to pump this information out to a bunch of people who are interested in hearing it. You know, it's like now that we are in the age of YouTube and social media, and people, you know, anybody you talk to, that, you know, just talking to friends, everybody loves watching videos like this on YouTube, you know, talking normal ass people talking about the things that they're interested in, who know something about history or who knows something about a topic. This is where, you know, the audience is now, where people are learning their information from us. From what?
I met a chap this weekend called David, who runs a very popular podcast in the UK called The Big Dig, for amateur archaeologists and for metal detectors, treasure hunters. But it's very mainstream, but it's not, well, it is mainstream, but he's was said to me yesterday that there's people like me, and my view of this stuff is what keeps him grounded. By grounded, meaning not totally obsessed with the academic stuff, but be willing to listen to curveballs from the outsiders like myself and Neil and other people. And I found that beautifully refreshing. And he said that, and so he's asked me to be on his podcast, which is a very, very popular amateur archaeologist podcast called The Big Dig. So there is hope. There's a whole other world out there that's working outside the university and outside the academic system that's doing it in their own way, and they're much more they're less bigoted and they're more open-minded, and they welcome people with alternative theories with open arms. And I think that's fantastic development.
Yeah. And people are ready for this information now. 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was like people were still so indoctrinated into the academic model where people thought, they needed to go to school, they needed to go to college in order to get that information. And they took that information in as their own. You talk to people who are, maybe 10, 20 years older than, maybe in their 40s, early 50s, people from that generation who took all the academic stuff very seriously. And then it's like people from Timony and my age, mid 30s downward. It's like all the academic stuff doesn't fucking matter. Like we talked about in the last virtual pub. It's like, oh, you guys learned something in school? We didn't fucking learn shit in school. There's some of the very, very, very basic elementary stuff that we learned, but it's just we were fed so it's like it had been all the love and heart and mythology and the bardic side of history lessons had been stripped out, and it was all just a table of figures to memorize. There wasn't that heart. Yeah, it was all just facts and figures and dates to memorize, so that kids would become parrots, essentially, just being able to parrot the information back without it, without owning it the way that a bard would own the story and make it their own kind of thing. But yeah, the time is right.
I fucking hated history class in school because it was just so boring. And then I've, over the years, coming to listen to people like you, Thomas, and others that history is so rich, and to hear all that, it's like it ignited my love and my interest for history. But you're not going to find it in school. So you set down your own path and you.
Well, they hide so many things from us deliberately.
Yeah, and the shit that they do give us, it's just so fucking boring. Like.
Well, I was talking to someone just tonight about very active interest in history from the time I was a kid. I read books and I watched all the TV documentaries, and I didn't know about the Cathars until I read Holy Blood, Holy Grail in the 1990s, and I still didn't believe it, because how could I not know about this?
Right, that's such a big part. It was such a big deal. How the fuck?
How could I not know about this? This is a big deal. And then it wasn't, and I had to go out and find Sean Martin's book, The Greatest Heresy, to prove, these guys were telling the truth. There really was this civilization in Europe, and Spain and France called the Cathars that were exterminated by the Pope. But I was kind of angry. How come you kept this from me?
Vincent Vega? Where the fuck have been at? Yeah. Anyways, I find that stuff fascinating. I'm so glad that I've come to love history through this vein.
Yeah.
All right.
They make it dry and stale, so you don't develop an interest in it.
Yeah. Eventually, I just quit going to school.
But they do the same. It's quantum physics and astronomy and everything else.
Yeah. All right, you guys. Well, we've made it to the end of another really good episode. I have to say, I'm really happy with this one. I was very tired and a little drained at the beginning and wasn't sure my energy was going to be up to par, but I really had a great talk today. I think we talked about a lot of really cool stuff. I always walk away feeling inspired, but thank you for your time.
This was a positive show.
Yep. Very. Yep. And on the other side of Samhain now, going into the darker time of the year, but I'm filled with a really light feeling going into the darker time of the year. I don't have a dread feeling. I don't, shit's going to happen. Things are going to happen that aren't going to be great, but I don't have that feeling. And so thank you guys for helping to keep that boat afloat. It's important. All right, Thomas, will you take care over there? Enjoy the rest of your trip. Safe travels home when you embark.
Yeah, I'll be back in Ireland in tomorrow night. No, it's Wednesday morning. And I have